Some of the most respected Protestant scholars quietly affirm Catholic beliefs about Mary, and I mean that literally, quietly. You won't see it in their sermons. It's not the focus of their public teaching, but if you open their commentaries, footnotes, and academic journals, they admit far more than most of their listeners would ever guess. Some affirm her perpetual virginity, others recognize her as the new Eve. A few even document how the early church venerated her with titles like All Holy. So why isn't this front and center? That's what we're unpacking. In the next few minutes, you'll see direct examples of Protestant theologians giving quiet nods to Catholic Marian doctrines, only to pull back or bury the implications. We're not talking about fringe voices. These are highly regarded figures in evangelical, Reformed, and Anglican traditions. And their reluctant affirmations actually help us see how rooted Marian teaching is in scripture, history, and the earliest Christian faith. Most people assume Marian beliefs were added later. But these scholarly admissions flip the script. You'll come away with a deeper understanding of how Mary fits into the biblical story, why the early church honored her, and how Catholics today can speak with confidence. And if you're interested in deepening your faith, hit like and tell me where you're watching from. And if you find this valuable, consider subscribing to stay rooted in Catholic truth. You can also support the making of these videos, our team, and the tools we use through the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen. Let's start by naming the issue clearly. Many Christians today are wary of Marian doctrine. Some fear it distracts from Christ. Others think it's unbiblical. Still others have never heard a coherent explanation. That's understandable. If the only thing you've heard about Mary is that Catholics worship her or invented stories, of course you'd be cautious. But here's the irony. The strongest pushback doesn't always come from Scripture. It often comes from misunderstanding church history or fear of sounding Catholic. The result? We have devout believers who love the Bible, who are open to truth, but who never realize that the early church honored Mary in ways far closer to Catholic practice than to modern evangelical minimalism. We have Protestant scholars who, under pressure to stay within certain theological lines, admit the evidence, but then pivot to avoid the conclusion. And we have Catholics who, when challenged, aren't sure how to respond. That's a problem. Not because everyone has to agree on every doctrine right away, but because confusion about Mary often leads to confusion about Christ. And when we reclaim the Marian vision, we're actually reclaiming a fuller view of the incarnation. That sets the stage. Without the next piece, it won't hold when life gets loud. Here's where things get surprising. In academic settings, you'll find Protestant scholars admitting that the early church called Mary the new Eve, and that this wasn't just poetic, it was theological. Mary's yes undoes Eve's no. Mary bears the word into the world, where Eve welcomed the word of deception. That's not Catholic propaganda. It's in the writings of early church fathers like Saint Irenaeus, who wrote in the 2nd century, "Just as the knot of Eve's disobedience was loosed by the obedience of Mary, so also was the sin of the Virgin Eve undone by the Virgin Mary," against Heresies 3.22.4. Sound familiar? Now, here's the twist. Many Protestant scholars agree this typology is biblical. They cite Genesis 3:15, where God promises a woman whose offspring will crush the serpent. They connect it to John 2:19, where Jesus calls Mary woman at the beginning and end of his public ministry. They even note how Revelation 12 depicts a woman clothed with the sun, pursued by the dragon, giving birth to the male child destined to rule the nations. Revelation 12:1-6. But after affirming this pattern, they pull back. They affirm the symbolism, then sidestep its implications. If Mary is truly the new Eve, then she's not incidental. She's integral to salvation history. She's not just biologically important, she's spiritually prefigured. And once you see that, doctrines like the Immaculate Conception start to make sense, not as invention, but as interpretation in continuity with the apostolic faith. Keep this, and the next step multiplies it. Skip it, and it collapses. Another area where Protestant scholars show unexpected agreement is on Mary's perpetual virginity. That means she remained a virgin before, during, and after the birth of Christ. Now, many Protestants today reject this, but several of their most respected theologians don't. The Reformers, including Luther, Calvin, and Zwingli, all affirmed it. And even modern voices like Tim Perry, an evangelical who wrote a book titled Mary for Evangelicals, acknowledged the long-standing tradition and the biblical evidence behind it. Here's the key. The Gospels never state that Mary had other children. The brothers and sisters of Jesus mentioned in Mark 6:3 and Matthew 13:55 use terms that, in ancient Semitic usage, could mean cousins or close kin. The Greek word adelphos is flexible, and in John 19:26-27, Jesus entrusts Mary to the Apostle John, something he would not have done if he had biological siblings present. Even the great Anglican scholar J.N.D. Kelly, in his work Early Christian Doctrines, states that Mary's perpetual virginity was universally held by the early church. That's not a Catholic opinion, it's an honest historical report. The problem is that many Protestant pastors never mention this, even when their own sources document it. They admit it in academic books, then omit it in everyday teaching. For Catholics, this matters. You're not holding on to strange traditions. You're standing in the middle of a consistent historical witness, affirmed even by those who don't fully agree. Good start, but unless you pair it with what's next, the practice thins out. Let's go deeper into the historical record. The early church didn't just believe these things intellectually, they lived them liturgically. Marian feasts were celebrated. Churches were named after her. Devotions arose, rooted in scripture and tradition. And guess what? Protestant historians confirmed this. J.N.D. Kelly again notes that early Christians saw Mary as the new Eve, the mother of the new humanity, and blessed above all women. He even admits that prayers to Mary existed by the 3rd and 4th centuries. The Subtuum Praesidium, a Marian prayer from Egypt, is dated to around 250 AD. It reads, "We fly to your protection, O Holy Mother of God. Despise not our petitions in our necessities." That's not medieval, that's early. Even Protestant biblical scholar Richard Bauckham in Gospel Women acknowledges that the veneration of Mary developed very early and was closely tied to Orthodox Christology. He's careful not to endorse Catholic dogma, but he doesn't deny the historical facts. If you'd like daily Catholic resources right at your fingertips, visit our website or scan the QR code on screen. You'll find daily Mass readings, the Seven Sorrows Rosary, devotional prayers, and Soul Search, a private web app for daily examination of conscience with guided reflections, progress tracking, and secure journaling to help you grow spiritually. This opens the door. The next part shows how to walk through it. Now, for the harder question. If all this is admitted, at least partially, why don't more Protestant churches embrace it? The honest answer is that it's not usually about lack of data. It's about theological boundaries. For many Protestant communities, affirming Marian dogmas feels like crossing a line into Catholic territory. It threatens their core identity. That's not meant as a criticism. It's just the sociological reality. Scholar Sarah Hinlicky Wilson, herself Lutheran, has written about this. She notes that Protestants often find themselves in a bind. They see Mary's greatness in Scripture. They admire her courage and faith, but they fear that going too far risks confusing her with Jesus. So they back off, not because the truth isn't clear, but because the implications are uncomfortable. For Catholics, this calls for patience and clarity. Don't mock or belittle those who hesitate. Instead, share how Marian teaching flows from Christ, not away from him. Mary magnifies the Lord. Luke 1:46-47. Her whole being points to Jesus, and that's the heart of it. Mary is not the center of our faith, but she reveals the center more clearly. That sets the stage for deeper healing and unity, not through pressure, but through invitation. Let's wrap this up. We've seen that leading Protestant scholars often admit more about Mary than their communities might expect. They affirm her perpetual virginity, recognize her as the new Eve, and acknowledge the early church's Marian devotion. Yet these truths are often buried, held quietly, cautiously, without pastoral follow-through. But you don't have to stay in that gray zone. If you're Catholic, lean into the confidence that our Marian faith is rooted in Scripture and history. If you're not, I invite you to explore without fear. Start by rereading Luke 1 slowly. Ask why Elizabeth calls Mary the mother of my Lord, Luke 1:43. Ask why every generation is to call her blessed, Luke 1:48. Then go deeper into the writings of the early Christians, into the Catechism, see CCC 490, 495, 966, and into your own prayer life. If this helped you, share it with a friend, subscribe, and check out our web app for daily Catholic resources and soul search to guide your spiritual journey. Truth draws near when you step toward it.